March 1900, northwestern China. The dead heart of the Taklamakan, a desert whose name is often translated, "Go in and you don't come out." The Swedish explorer Sven Hedin had made camp in the lifeless sand and found that his guide had left the expedition's only spade behind. The guide went back for it. A storm rose, and when the wind dropped, there was wood standing out of the sand, carved, shaped by human hands. He was standing in the middle of a street, a whole city, walls of mud, beams of poplar, a Buddhist stupa, a records office full of wooden tablets and scraps of paper, coins, silk, a carpet, everything left of a crossroads that the entire Silk Road once passed through. And here is the strange part. This city was not burned. It was not stormed. It was not buried by lava. There is no ash of a fire on its streets, no mark of a battle. It simply ran out of water. The river that fed it wandered away. The lake retreated into the desert, and the sand, slowly, over decades, walked down its streets and closed them for 1,500 years. And in the sand around it lay bodies, dried, untouched, with auburn hair and felt caps. They were almost 4,000 years old, older than the city itself. This is Loulan, the city no one killed, the city the desert drank. These are its streets. Only here, the streets are sand. To understand Loulan, you have to understand where it stood. And it stood in one of the most hostile places on Earth. The Taklamakan, the second largest sand desert on the planet. Dunes as tall as a 20-story building. In summer, the sand grows hot enough to cook on. But the Silk Road could not go around it. It could only press against its edges. And wherever there was water, oasis cities were born. The 36 kingdoms of the western regions, the Chinese chronicles called them, beads on a thread strung between China and the West. The most important bead was Loulan. It stood on the northwestern shore of Lake Lop Nur, at the point where the northern and southern roads of the Silk Road came together into one. Whoever held Loulan held the gate. The city was small. A Chinese census counted around 1,500 households and 14,000 people. It could not grow enough of its own grain. That came from neighbors. Loulan did not live on harvests. It lived on water and on the road. And that was enough for two superpowers to fight over it. From the east came the Han Empire. From the north, the Xiongnu nomads. Loulan lay between them, like a grain between two millstones. And the king of Loulan did the only thing he could. He sent one son as a hostage to the Chinese court and another to the Xiongnu, and prayed he had guessed the winner. One day he guessed wrong. Caravans of Han envoys began to vanish near the walls of Loulan. And in 77 BCE, China did not send a caravan. It sent an assassin. An envoy named Fu Jieze arrived with gifts and wine. When the king was drunk, they stabbed him. They hung his head from the tower above the northern gate. The kingdom was renamed Shanshan. The capital moved south, a garrison installed. The richest crossroads in the world did not survive by strength. It survived by water and by knowing exactly when to bow. Let us walk into the city. Not the ruin, the living Loulan, around the 3rd century CE. The first thing you feel is water. After hundreds of kilometers of sand, it is almost a shock. The trickle in the channels, the rustle of poplars, the cool of shade. The city is small and legible. A watercourse runs diagonally through it, half river, half canal. In the northeast stands the temple quarter, and above it the city's high point, a Buddhist stupa. A mud dome on a square base, some 10 meters tall. Not a pagoda, a stupa, carried here from Gandhara, from northern India, together with Buddhism itself. On the south bank of the watercourse stands the government house. Archaeologists nicknamed it the three-room house. It is a records office. Here they found a hoard of wooden tablets and scraps of paper, receipts, grain accounts, the rental of animals. Bureaucracy in the middle of a desert. To the west, the houses of the wealthy. To the southwest, the quarters of ordinary people. Walls of mud brick, frames of poplar and tamarisk, roofs flat and earthen. And in the streets, the whole world at once. A Han soldier in silk, a Sogdian merchant with his bales, a Buddhist monk in an ochre robe, a drover with his Bactrian camels. Several languages sound here at once, and the kingdom keeps its paperwork in the Indian Kharosthi script, not in Chinese. Through this market flowed everything. Chinese silk going west, Western woolens in a Greek-Roman taste coming east, jade, lacquer, bronze mirrors, glass, spices. Loulan made almost none of it. Loulan passed it through and took its cut. The city was green. The city was loud. The city was alive. And its whole life hung on a single thread, the river. Loulan has secrets it did not give up at once, and the first is the strangest. In the sands around the city lie bodies. They are called the Tarim mummies. The most famous, the beauty of Loulan, is around 3,800 years old. The dry air and the salt preserved her almost whole. Reddish hair, eyelashes, a felt cap with a feather, a woolen cloak, leather shoes, a little basket of wheat grains. And here is what matters. She is older than the city by 1,500 years. She lived here long before there was a Silk Road. For decades, she was explained simply: fair hair, European features, therefore migrants from the West, Indo-Europeans who came across the steppe. Then, in 2021, their genome was read, and the answer turned out to be different. They were not newcomers. They were a local population, descendants of the ancient North Eurasians, hunters of the Ice Age, a people who had nearly vanished by the time that age ended. Genetically, they were isolated. They almost never mixed with anyone, and yet astonishingly open to the world. They took wheat and dairy from the West, millet from the East, medicinal plants from Central Asia. Alone in their genes, at the crossroads of everything in their culture. Their Western look is not the trace of a recent migration, it is an echo of an Ice Age past. The second secret is in their writing. A kingdom on the very border of China kept its documents not in Chinese characters, but in Kharosthi, an alphabet of northern India. With Buddhism came the language of the records office too. And the third secret is at the lake itself. Lop Nur was called the Wandering Lake. For centuries, it seemed to move around the desert, changing its shores. The city was built beside the water, but the water under Loulan never stayed still. And that was a warning no one heard. The end of Loulan is like no other. There was no single night you could call the last. No army came, no fire broke out. No one tore down a single wall. There was simply less water. After the year 270, an ominous little detail appears in the garrison's documents. The soldiers' grain ration is being cut. The rivers give less and less. The bureaucracy of the desert counts the shrinking water, line by line. Why it shrank is still argued over. The old version is simple. The Tarim, which fed the city, changed its course. Lop Nur withdrew to the south. The water left on its own. The new version is harder. This may be the first man-made environmental disaster in history, long before the Aral Sea. To feed the garrison and the caravans, the oasis dug more and more canals, irrigated more and more fields, cut the poplar groves for firewood and timber. The oasis drank itself dry. And then a new northern road of the Silk Road opened, going around, and the caravans that Loulan lived for stopped coming. The water left, the poplars died, the fields crusted over with salt, and the people did the only thing left to them. They packed and they walked away. No battle, no catastrophe, no final day. They simply locked their doors and stepped out into the desert. Around the year 400, the monk Faxian passed through this region and described a land full of evil spirits and heat, almost empty of the living. More than 2 centuries later, the monk Shanshan passed by and found nothing here but ruins and sand. The desert closed over the streets, quietly, with no witnesses. It is the slowest apocalypse there is, death by thirst. For 1500 years, even the maps fell silent about Loulan. It became a rumor, a line in old chronicles, a name without a place. And then, a forgotten spade. In 1900, Sven Hedin put Loulan back on the map of the world. His guide, having lost a tool, stumbled in a storm onto carved wood and led the expedition to the city. A few years later, Aurel Stein came and lifted out of the sand what the desert had kept for 1500 years. Documents in Korosti and in Chinese, silk, a woolen carpet, Gandharan carving. Loulan was nicknamed the Oriental Pompeii. Only Pompeii was destroyed by fire. Loulan was destroyed by its own thirst. And then history added one last terrible rhyme. The dead lake Lop Nur, the very lake beside which the city died for want of water, became in 1964 the place where China tested its first atomic bomb. Go in and you don't come out. Twice over. Loulan left us no great temples, no royal tombs. It left a warning. It reminds every city in a desert, from antiquity to today, of a simple thing that is so easy to forget while the water is still running. A city's fate is not decided by its walls. It is decided by its water. Loulan held the gate between 2 worlds. Loulan passed half the wealth of the ancient world through its streets, and none of it saved the city when a single river ran dry. These were its streets, green, loud, alive, and now only the wind walks them, and the sand, and, very rarely, a human being come to remember. This is Loulan, the city the desert drank.